JBN, we keep you informed. Jamaica's first bank robbery. The first bank robbery in the history of Jamaica took place at the Canadian Bank of Commerce, 78 Halfway Tree Road, in the parish of St. Andrew, on Friday, September 18, 1970. The robbery made the headlines in the various news media. The Jamaica Constabulary Force was alarmed and deeply concerned about this brazen commando-style robbery within the town square. At approximately minutes past 4 p.m. on that Friday afternoon, 6 young men, armed with hand and shotguns, dressed in military fatigue, marched into the bank. The banks at that time were considered to be one of the safest places in Jamaica. It appeared then that a band of young, intelligent criminals decided to put into practice what they had learned from the movies. So on the day of the robbery, just about near closing time, the 6 young men, dressed in commander-style fatigue clothing, brandishing shotguns and handguns, marched into the Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce and commanded customers and the tellers of the bank, "No one move! Get down on the floor and lie on your belly!" Everyone was stunned and obeyed for fear of their lives. 3 of the robbers or gunslingers jumped over the counter, filling bags with whatever cash they came upon, while the leader and 2 others kept vigil on the public section of the bank. The manager, a Canadian, Mr. Eli Stosk, was locked in the vault. Within 5 minutes to 10, the operation was successfully carried out. The bandits left the bank with several bags filled with cash, all notes, and headed towards a waiting car parked a little distance from the bank along the Halfway Tree Road. They were surprised to see Special Constable Cecil Shaw, who was on his way to the said bank, escorting a female employee of the Revenue Department to make a lodgement of the revenue collected for the day. The Special Constable was unaware of the robbery, and the culprits were under the impression that he was coming to investigate. The leader of the escaping felons, Linford Coke, otherwise called Dungalion, intercepted the Special Constable and shot him at point-blank range with the shotgun. The victim fell to the ground unconscious and bleeding profusely. The female whom the Special Constable had been escorting fled the scene, and the robbers escaped in a waiting motor car with thousands of dollars. Of major significance was the fact that the culprits had escaped with money, most of which was money regarded in banking circles as decoy money, that is, money the serial numbers of which are recorded. Assistant Commissioner of Police ACP Isidore Hibbert, account of the robbery. I was a part of a team of investigators who commenced intensive investigations into the robbery and the shooting of the Special Constable. The first breakthrough came when I received a tip that a group of young men were at the Government Health Center on Slipen Road trying to obtain vaccination certificates for the purpose of traveling to another Caribbean island. In a jiffy, I was at the health center with my team. 3 suspects were held, all with decoy money. The suspects were taken to the Halfway Tree CID for interrogation. One of the suspects, Aston Ferguson, told me during the interrogation exercise that he would like to urinate. I escorted him to the men's room. He used the occasion as a ploy to speak to me confidentially. There he told me the names of the other persons involved in the bank robbery, and further that they would be at the Norman Manley International Airport by that time, preparing to leave the island by BWIA flight. This information was most helpful, so I caused a number of senior detectives, including the late DCP Reuben Robertson, deputy soup at the time, to proceed with dispatch to the airport to capture the suspects. That resulted in the detention of Linford Coke and Neville Johnson, just as they were in the act of boarding a BWIA flight. Each suspect was in possession of large sums of money. Continuing our investigations, a series of searches were carried out at the homes of each suspect, resulting in the recovery of more money from the suspects. The serial numbers of the money found in possession of the suspects matched the serial numbers of the decoy money. Identification parades were arranged for each suspect. They were positively identified by bank personnel. Before proceeding further, I am forced to return to the conduct of the female employee of the collectorate, who paid scant regard to the fallen Special Constable or protector. I experienced great difficulty in getting a statement from her or for her to attend the identification parade. Before the ID parades were held, strict instructions were given at the lockups that the suspects were not to be exposed or allowed any visitors, save and except their attorneys. A plan had seemingly been devised by the suspects, with the assistance of outside help, to defeat the success of the ID parades by having them appear in the number 1 halfway tree resident magistrates court under the names of other prisoners in custody. The court was not yet in session. I saw the accused Farquharson in conversation with a particular attorney. I heard the attorney telling Farquharson to keep quiet, as the appearance in court today will nullify the ID parade. But then Farquharson recognized me entering the court and said to his attorney, "See Detective Hibbert come in." The attorney then remarked to me, "Detective Hibbert, I hope you'll remember seeing these men in court before the holding of the ID parades." To which I responded, "I will also remember what you told the accused men." Quick investigations disclosed that a conspiracy was being hatched with other prisoners in custody to use their identity by answering to their names when the prisoners were being assembled to be taken before the court. A check of the police lockups identified those who were impersonated, thus destroying the plan to nullify the parades. The attorney in question had to withdraw from the proceedings. The identification parades were conducted as scheduled. Following a preliminary inquiry in the halfway tree resident magistrates court, subsequently, the 4 accused were committed to stand trial in the Home Circuit Court in Kingston. After a long process of jury empaneling, the trial got off to a brisk start before the late Mr. Justice R0BB3RY, with the prosecution headed by the late Deputy DPP Martin Wright. Of the defense team, Mrs. Roy Taylor, Seymour Stewart, and Amador Gilman. The prosecution led evidence firstly from bank personnel, majority of whom were young and not accustomed to the courtroom atmosphere. They were rigorously cross-examined by the defense team. Note to the police witnesses, I was the first to be called to the stand, being the lead investigator. I spent 3 full days in the witness box, giving evidence in chief covering the entire investigations. I was well aware that in a case of that nature, I would be rigorously cross-examined by the defense, bearing in mind the number of exhibits involved, where, when, and in whose possession they were found, as well as statements made by each of the accused. It was imperative that I made a record in my official notebook of all the events at the appropriate times. I refreshed my memory from such notes whenever I was uncertain of the answers to a certain line of questioning. This, of course, was with the court's permission. After 2 days of cross-examination, I left the witness box exhausted but triumphant. The next police witness was then Deputy Sup Reuben Robertson, a very experienced and competent witness. He was unshaken by the defense, and the Crown's case was on a sound foundation. The court adjourned at 4 p.m. that day. Detective Inspector L.V. Spaulding was to begin his evidence the following morning. That evening I spoke to him as to whether his notebook had been updated in view of the expected severe testing by the defense. He told me not to worry, his notes were in order, he said. The following morning, Spaulding, when called to the witness stand, contrary to the custom whereby the prosecutor, after the witness is sworn, leads the witness as to the testimony required, Spaulding started off on a frolic of his own. He began to give evidence on a matter totally unconnected with the case before the court. The judge, prosecutor, and jury looked on in amazement as he rambled along. The prosecutor tried desperately to stop him, but he continued. The judge finally was able to stop the witness, saying, "Just a minute, Inspector. Where are you going? You seem to be giving evidence about another case." The inspector then pulled himself together and apologized to the court. The defense team was delighted with Spaulding's fumbling and made heavy weather of it, while the prosecutor tried his best to correct the flaw by guiding back the witness to the evidence along the lines he gave at the preliminary inquiry. Special Constable Shaw gave evidence that while proceeding to the Canadian Imperial Bank that afternoon, escorting the female employee from the Revenue Office, he saw the 6 accused hurrying in his direction. Coke rushed across the road, stuck a sawn-off shotgun in his side, and fired. He was hospitalized for several weeks. A large portion of his liver had to be surgically removed, but he survived and later worked for many years in the Supreme Court Library. The Crown then led evidence from the sergeant, who conducted the various identification parades with respect to the identification of each accused by the various witnesses, and took testimony from customers in the bank at the time. At the end of cross-examination by the defense team, the Crown closed its case. In closing addresses to the jury by the defense, it was submitted that the only truthful prosecution witness was Detective Inspector Spaulding, whom we can recall had completely gone off track. It was suggested that I had been seen frequently in company with witnesses from the bank and had been acting in complicity with the witnesses. The jury was out for 54 minutes, following a detailed summing up by Justice Rowe, then returned with unanimous verdicts of guilty against all accused as charged. Appeals failed. Coke, who received the longest sentence, argued his own appeal before a panel presided over by the late Justice Fox, acting as president in the local court of appeal. One of the suspects held at the health center when we carried out a raid there following the robbery, a motor mechanic from St. Thomas, who was said to have been the driver of the getaway car, ended up testifying for the prosecution and totally nullified the case for the defense. So impressed was Justice Fox with Coke's presentation of his own case. The judge remarked before Coke was led away by the police the day of the appeal hearing that it was unfortunate that he had used his talents the wrong way. His lordship recommended that while in prison, the Correctional Services Department grant him time to further his education at cost, no UTEC. Coke made the best use of the opportunity. He subsequently passed 9 GCE subjects at A levels with distinction and credit. He later became a teacher at the Correctional Services Training School. He was regarded as a model prisoner and was released from prison much earlier due to his good conduct and assistance during his incarceration. Coke continued to teach inmates at the Correctional Services Department after his release. However, he was shot dead by unknown assailants shortly after, thereby cutting short his efforts to further rehabilitate himself and rehabilitate other prisoners. Farquharson was killed by fellow prisoners during an uprising at the General Penitentiary shortly before he was to begin serving his sentence. Flash died years later, reportedly the result of a motor vehicle accident. JBN, we keep you informed. Please remember to like, subscribe, share, leave us a comment, and click the notification bell to receive our daily uploads.